Harlan's Wake, Part 1. Standing in the familiar field of wind-blown grasses, Tyler watched the lights from the top of the hill. Over the rustling of the trees came the strumming of guitar, banjo, muffled words. No place like home, he told himself, and strode through the wildflowers towards that place. He hoped the wind would wash the smell of the dead away from him. As Tyler neared the woodshed marking the start of his family's land, harsh smoke from a fire drifted to him on the breeze, along with soft crying. His eyes pierced the shadow of the old woodshed with the leaky tin roof, and saw the frame of a large woman huddled on a tree stump. A sob wrenched her shoulders. The shoulders froze midway through another sob, and her head swung to face Tyler. "Who in the blue blazes?" Eyes still sharp as a hawk, Tyler thought, his blue funk slipping a little at the sound of the voice. "It's me, Aunt Vi. Tyler." Stiff legs shuffled forward. "Tyler? Little Ty?" The shape came stumbling towards him and emitted a peal of gleeful laughter. "Why, I knew you'd come, boy. Didn't pay no never mind to that sourpuss brother of yours, telling us all how all-fired important you take your job." Aunt Vida shook him by the shoulders, still strong despite her 66 years, then tugged him out of the shadows of the decrepit woodshed towards a group of people gathered around a fire. "Look what I found sniffing around out back." The music jarred to a halt, and the remnants of the Brown clan turned at the sound of Aunt Vida's roar. A dog barked and leapt around Tyler and Aunt Vi as they approached. "Blue!" Tyler greeted the dog silently as his uncle and his two unmarried cousins watched Vida drag her favorite nephew into the firelight. Tyler let his aunt take his military-issue pack and nervously rubbed his hands against the sides of his United Nations fatigues. A thick silence overtook the men of the Brown clan, broken only by the tumble of a log in the fire. Vida growled. "Now listen, you flea-bitten goats. He came to see his pappy, same as you. He came, and I don't want y'all digging up things best left in the past, you hear?" Her hand propelled Tyler forward into the circle. He nodded to the group as he patted the head of the hound, nuzzling his thigh, far happier to see him than any of the family looked around the fire. "Uncle Hugh? Jack? Marty?" Somber nods all around. The fire burned itself down some more. Its heat licked at Tyler's side, but he didn't move. Jack kept his eyes on the ground, and Marty waited on his father's worn granite scowl. "Is my pa—" Tyler started to say, but couldn't finish. Uncle Hugh grunted, tossed the stick he was whittling into the fire, and pushed his straw hat back on his forehead with the blade of his jackknife. White hair and leathery skin framed the eyes that looked Tyler up and down. Strong farmer's hands closed the knife, and he shook his head. "No, boy, he's still here. In a world of hurt, mind. My guess is he's been waiting for you to get clear of those zombies long enough to—" Aunt Vida growled behind Tyler. Uncle Hugh glared at her, but whatever he saw on his sister's face trumped his anger. "Your pa's asleep," he said. "Tom's with him. You wait till morning now," he warned, his voice as stern as his face. "Tom won't like me in the same room as him or Pa," Tyler thought bitterly. The old anger roiled in his belly, but now it was mixed with equal parts guilt. The fire licked painfully at his leg, but he bore it like a penance he admitted to himself for the first time. "My father's dying, and I wasn't here." Hugh looked past Tyler to his sister after a long moment, then met Tyler's eyes. A nod of greeting, then his hand stretched to the convenient log behind the newcomer. "Sit down, boy, before your leg's well done." Tyler sat, suffering a faceful of licks from Blue before the dog leapt back out into the night. Jack's fingers picked at his banjo again, and Vida smiled in her brother's direction before sitting down beside Tyler. Marty pressed a chipped mason jar into Tyler's hands with a half-smile, and Tyler nodded back grateful, then sipped the liquid fire and winced. Tyler Brown had come home at last. Tyler walked between his primary and the street, right hand on the butt of his gun and left hand sketching subtle signs for the rest of the security detail to follow, as they passed the waist-high wire fence holding masses of screaming civilians against the side of the building. Some carried signs scrawled with hate or praise. Some wore expressions of anger or love or fear. One carried a long, thin stake of nickel. Tyler caught a glimpse of it beneath the man's leather bomber jacket and instinctively shoved his left hand back into the primary's chest, drawing his sidearm with his right. The attacker clubbed Tyler's gun away with the post of the sign he carried, and raised the stake above his head as he vaulted over the fence. Tyler's eyes raced to his backup, saw that the man had been distracted by the way the crowd heaved against the fence. Tyler leapt into the air, pushing his body between the silver he guarded and the nickel spike that would end his long life. The world shuddered as the stake buried itself in Tyler's chest. The world shuddered again, and a boot dug into Tyler's hip. "Get up, army boy!" Tyler's legs spun clear of the blankets he wore and pushed against the boot. Its wearer stumbled, crying in surprise as he regained his balance. Arms balled in fists and spread for attack, Tyler's eyes slitted open against the morning light. Blue yelped in surprise and clattered off the bed, following a blurry form that backed silently out the door almost before Tyler recognized his brother Tom. Tyler sagged on one elbow. This wasn't how he'd seen the reunion getting started. He shook his head in a silent curse, and his head began to throb. "Oh, almost forgot how bad it kicked," Tyler thought, as he remembered the moonshine he'd had way too much of the night before. His head throbbed worse when he stepped out into the bright morning sunshine. The chop of Tom's axe did little to alleviate the pain, as wood flew apart with violent force on the block before his brother. "He should be up soon," Tom said, as he wiggled the axe blade free from the block. The prodigal son rubbed the backs of his hands against both of his eyes, tearing in the raw sunshine, and took in deep breaths in his attempt to rid himself of his first moonshine headache in 6 years. Tom didn't look up from his chopping. Tyler watched silently, recalling the cords of wood the two of them had raced through to prove themselves against each other in their youth. In his mind's eye, he could see his father sitting on the front steps, smoking that corncob pipe of his and adjudicating the many competitions held there. How long does he have? Now the axe sunk into the chopping block down to the haft, Tom's shoulders flexing almost to the limit of his frayed plaid shirt with the swing. Tyler could hear his brother blow the last of his air from his lungs angrily as he stood straight. With one massive hand, he pushed the black hair from his eyes and turned back towards the house and Tyler. "We're all real glad you could take time away from playing hero for the zombies to attend your father's funeral, brother. And don't you worry, I'm sure he'll be dead long before your weekend pass from the boogeyman expires." Tom's face switched from angry to disinterested in a split second, infuriating Tyler as it always had. He dusted his hands off and walked closer, making a show of perusing Tyler's lieutenant stripes and whistling with feigned interest before shouldering roughly past. Tyler burned from head to toe, wordless, as Tom stomped up the wooden stairs and slammed the peeling screen door behind him. Looking down, he saw his arm stiff at his side, knew his back was ramrod straight in a defensive parody of standing at attention. He tried to relax, but found he didn't know how. The porch door screeched again. "Come on inside and get some food in you, boy," Uncle Hugh said. He looked around the yard, past the tractor and the sheds, and let his eyes creep up the hill he'd climbed down just the night before. Tyler had spent his childhood running through the miles of forest all around, hunting cougar and bear with Tyler and Pa. But that was another life ago, and he couldn't remember the last time this place felt like home. Aunt Vi's cooking was the one thing that hadn't changed. Her fresh-baked buns, sizzling bacon and eggs, and cool apple cider had Tyler's mouth watering before he even reached the table. Washing down the last bite with a sip of hot coffee, fresh from Vida's battered old percolator, Tyler couldn't remember the last time he enjoyed a meal as much. It wasn't that the chow in the army was bad, but in all his time on the Silver Security Detail, he'd eaten in some of the finest restaurants in the world. Still in all, nothing beat Aunt Vi's cooking. Uncle Hugh, Jack, Marty, and Tom all shoveled their food in quickly and quietly, leaving Vida to fill the hole in the conversation as she refilled all the men's plates. "Well, the Chase homestead burned down, you know. The nearest neighbors are the Harkleys over the hill now. Your brother cleared out all the nettles from around the pond last year, so the rabbits are out for his head. Oh, Almanac says we're in for the worst winter of the decade, but your father says—" Her voice faded to nothing. Tyler's younger cousin Jack's curiosity overcame his hunger, and over a mouthful of eggs, he asked, "What are they like, Ty?" Marty's spoon slowed down to a crawl to listen to the response, and Tyler dove for the friendly conversation. "The Silvers?" Two heads nodded as one. Do they really crawl up inside people while they're just dying?" Jack blurted. "Or do they have to be goners, real stiff and smelly like?" Marty finished for him. Uncle Jack pushed his plate away with a grimace. Tyler suppressed a chuckle and leaned forward over his plate to settle what sounded like a long-standing debate, when a shadow fell across the table. Looking back, Tyler saw Tom standing beside his chair with his fists balled up tight at his side. "Paws up." Uncle Hugh and his boys left to tend to their own farm after breakfast. After seeing them out, Aunt Vida bent to the dishes, and Tyler followed his brother into their father's small bedroom at the back of the wood cabin. The smell of linseed oil and vapor rub hung to the walls of the drab old bedroom. Tyler's face went numb as he stared down at his father stretched out on the bed. Harlan Brown had been the biggest, strongest man Tyler had ever known. The skeletal figure he saw now bore no resemblance to that man. Advanced cancer of the lungs, left undiagnosed until far too late. Harlan hadn't seen a doctor in 15 years, Tyler was sure, until the day he'd fallen while tilling his fields, gagging on his own blood. Blue whimpered, threading past Tyler and lying down on the threadbare rug at Harlan's side. Tyler turned away from the wheezing form and saw his father's corncob pipe on the bureau. He remembered the smell of it filling the small cabin that he, his brother, and father had lived in all their lives, until the day, 6 years gone now, that Tyler enlisted. A silent movie of times gone by flashed through his mind. Tyler surrendered to it, remembering Christmas and gifts hewn by his father's skilled hand from branch and bough. Remembered wrestling those strong arms at the kitchen table, straining against a patient, grinning giant. Remembered sitting sullenly with his brother on the front porch, presenting childish disputes to the wise old man of the house. Remembered whittling this very corncob pipe one Father's Day. "Tyler!" the shivering man whispered, then moaned. Tyler knelt beside his father, shivering beneath sweat-stained sheets. The eyes in their hollow sockets were unseeing, the thin blue lips twisting to manage words. "Yes, Pa?" "Don't you play near that pond here. Nettle's gonna tear your pants. Can't afford new pants ever." Harsh, wet choking cut off the fevered words. "Pa?" Tyler lay his hand on his father's shoulder, horrified at the lightness, the limpness of it. "Pa, can you hear me?" Harlan gagged again, a trickle of saliva and blood collecting at the corner of his mouth. The choking ramped into violent barking, accompanied by body-shaking spasms. Tyler helped his father sit up. Tom roughly forced a cool, wet cloth into his brother's hands and walked woodenly out of the room. Horrified, Tyler ran a clean patch of the cloth over his father's searing forehead, while the old man wept in his arms. Aunt Vida relieved Tyler from his father's side after a time and sent him to find his brother. Tyler found him on the porch. He leaned down against the rough wooden beam and slid to the ground beside him, welcoming the cloying smell of Tom's cigarette as a penance and to cover the coppery smell of his father's blood in his fatigues. Tom pinched the butt and flicked it from the porch, exhaling blue smoke. He ain't come out of the past for a week now. Some days he don't wake up at all. The grass was burning badly under the summer sun, Tyler noticed, as he tracked the cigarette through the air to the ground, absorbing his brother's words as best he could manage. "He was too proud to call for you when he got sick, Ty," Tom whispered. "But I knew we wanted to see you. Once he took to seeing things, he'd just smile and call for his tyke, like when you was little." Tyler squeezed his eyes tight, but nothing could block the memory of his father's painful spasms. Tom jerked himself to his feet and towered over his brother. "I hate you. I hate you for turning your back on him and leaving." Tyler looked up, stricken, into his brother's enraged face. Tom's chest heaved, the venom finally working itself out after years of festering. "He was scared, goddammit. Lots of people are scared of them monsters, Ty. He was scared for you. Always for you!" Tom's fist barreled down and struck Tyler across the jaw like a freight train. The powerful blow sent his head smashing to the porch. He landed on his right shoulder, and a searing agony exploded in the bandaged wound below his collarbone. Still Tyler didn't move. Tom's blow had torn the scab from an older, greater pain, and he offered no resistance as he waited for the next blow to fall. It never came. Tom forced his right hand open, watching it and talking as if to himself. "I don't hate you for leaving," he whispered. "And I'm trying not to hate you for taking a piece of the old man's heart with you when you left." Tom held out his arm. "What I hate you for ain't your fault." Tyler grabbed at the hand like a drowning man. Tom pulled him easily to his feet and held the hand like a vise. "At least you're in time to help me bury him." Tyler heard the pain in his brother's words, heard him accept, aloud, their father's fate, and Tom's fingers went limp with the words. He tore his hands free and fled the porch and Tyler's presence. Aunt Vida appeared beside Tyler, rubbing his shoulder. They watched Tom storm out of sight into the trees. "He's a good boy, that Tom. Just needs a little time, Ty, to get to know you again. I was proud when I heard what you'd done for that creature in New York, Ty. We all were," she added with a toss of her head towards the now vacant yard. The tender moment passed, and Vida slapped him hard on the back. "Come on in, have another coffee and warm up. Whew, those army rags smell right. We need to fix you some clean clothes, boy." Tyler accepted an old red hunting shirt and a pair of his brother's jeans, belt cinched tight around his smaller frame. The coffee warmed his bones, and Vida's happy bustling and relaying of the local gossip warmed him some more deeper inside. There weren't as many neighbors as there'd been 6 years ago, but Vida still knew the whereabouts, why-fors, and what-nots of each and every resident of Shooter County like the back of her hand. "The damn Chase boys are still around here, stirring up trouble. I'd feel sorry for 'em if it hadn't been their own damn fault, their house burning up like that. Silly buggers, brewing up whiskey in their own bathtub." Vi hooted and slapped the table. "Leastways, their folks are okay. Bought into a retirement condominium in Price City. Left those boys high and dry, and meaner'n you'll ever hear told." Vida settled her weight into a creaking chair. "Now, how long will you stay, nephew?" "I'm not sure," Tyler answered, grinning and spinning the last gulp of coffee in the bottom of his cup, enjoying the image of the 3 Chase boys shivering in their underwear on a cold October night while their house burned up, little explosions of whiskey lighting up the sky. "I'll stay at least as long as Pa." Tyler coughed to hide the sudden tightness in his throat. Vida pursed her lips. "Tyler, the good Lord will take my brother soon, I don't doubt. And a good thing, too. Man as proud as your daddy shouldn't waste away so long. It's a hard thing, Ty, to come home like this. But there's a wake starting tonight, so you're going to get an earful of what your daddy's been like his whole life. Now that's something to look forward to." Tyler nodded. "I never thanked you for sending for me, Vi." The big woman gently swatted Tyler's hands, then laid hers down on top of his. "No need. You're family." Then she leaned in conspiratorially. "Now tell an old gossip, Ty. What are them creatures really like?" Where do you begin? Tyler wondered. Harlan's Wake, Part 1.